Hello, Serie A fan. Is it better to be a lion in the league and a kitten in the cup? Or would you rather sacrifice the Scudetto for some European glory? We tackle these big questions with the help of a very special guest. But don't worry, there's still plenty of time to discuss the important things as well. Sarri's eagle, punching a ref in the face, and a €10,000 crotch grab in this episode of Scudetto. Hello and welcome to another episode of Scudetto. Another extremely busy week of watching football for us. Big weekend in the league, full round of European games as well. Before we get into all of that, I've got some good news and some bad news for our listeners. So let's do the bad news first. Kenny's away this week. Don't worry, he will be back next week. But that means the good news is we've got a very special guest to replace him. Described herself as Scudetto Pod superfan. It's the host of Milan podcast, Milan Obsession, which you can find on any good audio platform. Elaine, welcome to Scudetto.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. And I am the Scudetto Pod superfan. So this is just like the ultimate for me.
Well, it's great to have you on.
The question is, will you still be a superfan after you go through this process?
I guess we'll answer that at the end.
Yeah, we can come back to that one later. Elaine's also tweeting from @MilanObsession about all things Milan, so you can find her there. And as you've just heard, we've got Boaz as usual. Boaz, how are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you, Oscar?
I am very well, thank you. I've just confessed to both of you I haven't got a beer for the civilized beers section this week. I've just come from drinking a nice beer in an English pub in Helsinki. It was called a Hepa. It was described as like a southern hemisphere pale ale. It was pretty tasty, actually.
And could you taste the southern hemisphere in there?
I'm not sure really what southern hemisphere means in the context of beer. I was just thinking the other day, if anyone ever listens to our beer reviews, to our podcast for the beer reviews, like we know nothing about beer. But anyway,
we drink a lot of variety of beers.
True, that is true. What are you drinking today on that note?
I have a Ale Coq Belgian IPA, and that's all I have to say about it. Very standard IPA. It's good. It's my terrible review.
But you confess that you don't have a beer this time either.
Yeah, I'm a last minute sub, so sorry.
You're on a different time zone as well, so maybe it's not really appropriate beer drinking time for you. So
it isn't 5 o'clock yet, no.
Again, we'll see what happens at the end of this process. Maybe once the podcast is finished, you'll start day drinking.
Good stuff. All right, well, let's get into the action then. And I guess we have to start with the Rome derby. I have to say last Sunday was quite a depressing day for me. I was in a pub watching the North London derby and the Rome derby kind of simultaneously being shown, and obviously not good results for someone with my sympathies in either game.
It's nice that the producers prearranged these games to be at the same time for you, though.
Yeah, that was helpful, actually. In another context, I would have been very grateful. But we should talk about how Lazio have really come on under Sarri. Like you were saying, Buzz, that they're kind of breaking very well. And I think that's, you've got to credit the front three for that and the kind of interplay between them. But they're also looking pretty solid and difficult to break down, aren't they?
Definitely. And Lazio had been struggling for the past few games. And obviously it will take, and it has taken some time to assimilate Sarri's methods. But in this game, it looked like they'd planned their strategy to perfection. As a side note, I wanted to say that the Rome derby is usually quite a drab affair, quite cagey, whereas this game, obviously finishing 3-2, was a completely different proposition. But I think Lazio were worthy winners and could have gone on to win 4-2 or 5-2 even if certain occasions were taken.
But for a neutral, it was great. I mean, I'm sorry, Oscar, but for a neutral, it was a great game to watch. Very exciting.
Both on the pitch and off the pitch.
Yes.
I think that's definitely a fair comment. It was, as you're saying, a big occasion and lovely to see Stadio Olimpico close to full capacity again. And like you say, but it's often a very kind of cagey affair. It did start off looking quite dull, but the match obviously heated up and it really did look like Roma were going to get back into it, unlike the other game that I was watching. So yeah, definitely agree with those comments.
Mourinho was felt particularly hard done by the result, although I think his laments were slightly short-sighted. I'd also want to point out that despite all the fanfare that has been made of Mourinho's season thus far, if you look at the bare results, Fonseca had the exact same point haul at this stage of the season last season. So, I mean, it's a work in process, but suddenly Mourinho is finding himself in a slightly tougher situation. And he's also the first manager to lose his first derby since losing AK in 2011. So not the best omen.
Yeah, it could be the beginning of what we all know often happens with Mourinho teams, couldn't it? And that you were saying, Buzz, that he's already kind of picked out a couple of players who are maybe going to get the Luke Shaw treatment, not the favourites, shall we say.
Yeah, at the time of recording, Roma played Zorya in the Ukraine, and they won convincingly, but it looks like Mourinho has already picked the players that he will dislike and throw to the Lions this season, and that's Brian Reynolds at right back, Diawara and Gonzalo Villar in the midfield. Villar, who got quite a lot of game time last year and was very impressive. And it looks like the latter two are going to be sold in January. Again, while Mourinho came in with this feel-good factor initially, it now feels like it's more of the same slowly.
Yeah, maybe Reynolds can get on the phone to Luke Shaw and get some support.
Emotional support.
But yeah, while we're on the topic of the manager reaction, Elaine, there are a few better sights in football than Sarri with the eagle at the end. That was glorious, wasn't it?
That was amazing. I mean, eagles are big, heavy birds too. And I know that he talked about like how he didn't realize the adrenaline that the Rome derby would give him. And it was like, I don't know, how old is he? He's like a million years old. And just seeing him there with the eagle, like in front of the curve, it looked like so Serie A. I loved it.
Yeah. The eagle on one arm and a cigarette in the other hand.
Yeah, exactly.
The iconic vision of Sarri.
He just needs to teach the eagle to roll him a roll up.
Indeed. Okay, let's move on, shall we, and talk a little bit about Inter. I'm sure you'll both be pleased with the fact that Inter have stumbled a little bit this week. But maybe starting off with that game against Atalanta, which once again, very exciting for the neutral. We haven't got Kenny here to break it down for us from an Atalanta point of view, but some lovely goals in that game, weren't there, Baz?
Yeah, and Inter were perhaps fortunate to come away with a point despite playing at home, because Atalanta seemed to suddenly turn it on, and also had a goal disallowed by VAR because the ball had crossed the line before for a corner before it was scored. So one of those games where in different circumstances Atalanta might have won, but I guess Inter, once they went 2-1 up, not playing so well, you expected them to get the job done, and yet they as I said, they dropped points and could have even gone on to lose it. Atalanta were very impressive though, back to their glorious best, really outrunning Inter all over the pitch, and some great performances from the individuals.
Yeah, and they scored a goal which was later ruled out for VAR, didn't they, to win the game at the end?
Yeah, so that was what I was kind of alluding to, but essentially Andanovic in goal kind of received a back pass and let it slide through and made a real cock-up of the situation, and essentially the ball, Atalanta managed to score from the situation, but incredulously for everyone, the VAR took it all the way back. In the end, it's the right decision, but it's one of those ones that I don't think I've ever seen before.
Yeah, the ball had gone out of play quite a long time previously, I think.
So we should also say that Inter missed a penalty in this game with bizarrely left back Di Marco stepped up. Supposedly he's the best penalty taker for Inter, and he hit the bar.
Yeah. There are a lot of great goals. Malinowski was a beast in that game too. Atalanta really took it to them, and it bodes well for Serie A. I think that it was a very competitive match because we talk about like who's going to finish top of the table and stuff like that. And Atalanta have been a little bit slow to get started, and so it's nice to see things balancing out a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right to highlight that as a kind of early potential title race clash, and I guess we've got another one coming up this weekend which we'll get to shortly, but But first, let's just laugh about Inter's kind of stumble against Shakhtar. But as you summarised the highlights of this game as being very few. It was just a night to forget for Inter, really, wasn't it?
Shakhtar are slowly becoming Inter's bogey team. This is the third time in three games that they draw 0-0. The last time Inter got the same result against the one club was back in 1994, 3 times in a row. So it's kind of an odd one, particularly because on paper, at least, Inter should be the superior team despite their summer losses. Having said that, we should give some credit to Shakhtar, who incidentally are managed by De Zerbi, so they kind of fit into our remit. But despite not really having a striker because of injuries and whatnot, Shakhtar really went out and attacked and played the quote unquote the right way. And Inter, I think Inter are a lion in the Serie A and a kitten in the Champions League. This is they've only got 5 wins in their last 20 games in the Champions League. They seem to come unstuck, and they haven't scored a goal yet this season, with Dzeko in particular missing a few sitters that in any other season might have been candidates for the Morata Challenge. So Inter have themselves to blame, but this group is far from over for them. And I think with the Sheriffs in the other games scoring, miraculously beating Real Madrid, it makes things interesting. But if I were a betting man, I'd have Inter qualifying from this group still.
Yeah. I like how you're sort of preemptively claiming Shakhtar as an honorary Italian team, so we can just continue to cover them when they knock Inter out. What do you make of Inter's chances getting out of this group, Elaine? Where's your money?
There's, they say death taxes and certain things, and Juventus never win the Champions League, and apparently Inter have gone into the phase. It's 3 years running that they've not qualified out of the group stage. So I like their chances of not qualifying personally.
Yeah, they'll probably make a reasonable run at the Europa League if they don't.
Considering Inzaghi set out qualifying from the group as his main target for the season, it would be quite calamitous if he would follow in Antonio Conte's footsteps and get knocked out again.
Yeah, especially if he can't deliver what Conte was in the league either. So in contrast to Inter, it looks like Juventus potentially job done after just 2 games. They're sitting at the top of their group, I believe.
This game was like a perfect Allegri game. 1-0 just by the skin of their teeth, defended completely. I think they had 27% possession or something, is super low. 26% possession with 1 goal from Chiesa, and each team, both Chelsea and Juve, only had 1 shot on goal, but Chelsea took 16 shots. So yeah, I don't know if you call it that they're done, but it's a purely Allegri win for sure.
Yeah, and they've obviously been performing a lot better in that competition than they have been in the league. Kenny's put a question in for us, actually, to discuss on this game, saying, is Chiesa the answer for Italy long-term to play at number 9 after Allegri's comments that perhaps he sees him as a number 9 or a wide forward?
So anyone who's been to Italy knows that first you build a church and then you build a village around it. And in this case, I think this is my obligatory Football Manager reference, but when I buy Chiesa for my Milan side, I always play him up front. And I think in the long run, that's his ideal position. He is really we've mentioned it time and time again, but he is really a big game player. He shows up when it's important. He gets the important goals, and his attitude is so right. So stile Juve, let's be honest. He's a winner, and that's what they need right there. And they could probably do with a few more players like him. Just touching on Allegri that Elaine mentioned earlier. I mean, yes, they had 27% possession, but this was a slight tactical masterclass considering he was playing against the European champions and he was missing both Morata and Dybala for injury reasons. He had to switch it around a couple of times within the game. And initially, they were really being outrun and pressed by Chelsea. But by the time he narrowed the game down and had both Bernardeschi and Chelsea and Chiesa play very wide. I think Chelsea didn't really know what to make of it. And also Lukaku was pretty much neutralized by Bonucci, who had him in his pocket for the whole game.
Yeah, I imagine they will not continue that form into this weekend when they face...
They are the reverse Inter. They are a kitten in the league and a lion in the Champions League.
Well, they're mid-table. They're 10th place in the league now, so they've moved up in the world. Like a week ago, they were in the relegation zone. So 2 weeks ago, so they're moving up.
Moving in the right direction, yeah. So that's actually tomorrow's game. The Friday night kickoff is Torino versus Juventus. So maybe we tune into that, see if they can recapture some of that lion-like form.
And that's going to be exciting because Juric famously has his teams running their lungs out. And so far this season, Juventus have had trouble coping with teams who play in that style.
Yeah, that's going to be a good matchup. The Derby della Mole is always good anyway, but definitely want to watch that one.
Right, we've put it off for long enough. We've talked about all the other big narrative and action points of the week. I'm afraid, Elaine, we're going to have to get you to relive the robbery, or as you described it, homicide that we witnessed. Do you want to just kind of talk us through it, how you were feeling when you were watching the game?
Well, it started out like it was our first game back in 7 years at the San Siro. We're playing Atletico Madrid, which we'd played, they were our last opponent in the Champions League. And the choreo was beautiful and everyone was singing Pioli is on fire. And then they played totally different than we started off with Liverpool. And it was so exciting. And Leao's goal, it was just like the perfect start to the match. And then we had a referee who I normally don't say things like this, but
you're not allowed to give a dishonorable mention to a referee on this podcast.
That's okay.
Kenny's done it once before, but he got a stern talking to. So
I do know the rules, but Mr. Cüneyt Çakır from Turkey, he just he changed the match. He gave Kessie 2 yellow cards early on, and so Kessie was sent off in the 29th. And everyone, even Simeone, knows that changed the game. Everyone saw it. We were dominating completely, and Atletico were completely lost until that happened. And even through the rest of the first half, Leao had that amazing overhead bicycle kick that he hit the crossbar. Had that gone in, the game would have been totally different. And that was even after Kessie was sent off. But the discrepancies in refereeing just kept continuing. And so like the fouls that Kessie was sent off for, there were bigger fouls from Atletico that weren't even called, including like in the 70th, I know Luis Suarez came bungling into Magnan and stomped on his foot, and he knew it too. You saw the way he tried to get him to get up right away and stuff like that, but no call. Meanwhile, like Kessie just barely stamps on somebody's foot from behind, probably not intentional, who knows, but it just was really inconsistent. And then we get down to the 97th minute of 6 minutes of stoppage time, and they're given it was the 94th minute actually that they were given a penalty for a handball in the box, and Atletico's Lamar actually handled it first, which like a blind person could see, and VAR clearly showed, and yet there was no intervention. Cüneyt did not go to the screen to review it at all. VAR did not intervene in any way, and they gave the penalty, which gave them the win. We had conceded in the 84th, I think. So, yeah, it totally changed the game, and everyone knew it. And again, like I normally respect the referees and I'm very objective about these things, but in this situation, it was just so one-sided and really unfortunate. If you go back and you watch, I watched it like 3 times because I just wanted to be sure that like what I saw was what I saw. And it was really, really unfortunate the way that he influenced the game, and he's looking at a suspension / possible ending of his reffing career. I know Milan are going to appeal officially, but that doesn't change the results. It doesn't change the fact that Milan are at the bottom of our group with 0 points when we deserved a lot more.
Yeah, it's really, really disappointing. And I think for people that maybe didn't watch the game and have just seen on social media, replays of the fouls, you probably wouldn't have any strong objection as a neutral. It's like, yeah, they're harsh, but they probably are fouls. But like you were saying, and like you highlighted in your blog post, it's just the kind of inconsistency of it, which is just really like jarring.
Yeah, the other fouls were just so blatant and clear. And there was one where Hermoso did almost the exact same foul on Saelmakers as Kessie got one of his cards for by grabbing him by the shoulder, and he actually landed on top of him, and it was in their box, and still no call. And so it was just crazy. Like, if you go back and watch the whole thing, it was not good. So that was really harsh as a Milan fan to deal with, and you saw our young players. This is a learning experience for them, and in a very painful way to learn on the highest stage. And so yeah, but on the flip side, we did have a good experience at Spezia, where in February we had lost to them 2-0. And so we beat that demon with 2 goals. Daniel Maldini got his first start and his first goal. He is a third generation Maldini. And Kalulu sent in a great cross from Leao, started that play. And then Brahim Diaz scored as well, and that one was hilarious because he started to take his shirt off in Calabria, pulled it back down so he wouldn't get a yellow card. So that was nice. It was a scrappy game. Spezia were, hats off to them. They played really well, but that was a nice start to the week. But midweek, not so much.
Absolutely. That should probably be an early honourable mention for Daniel Maldini.
I was just going to say.
You haven't got that on your list, actually, Baz.
I was just adding it to the list, but definitely honourable mention for being third generation goal scorer for Milan on his first ever start. And just picking up from a few things that Elaine mentioned just there, I think that if you were to just look at the table, you'd think, wow, this is a terrible campaign. But actually, Milan came out of both games with a lot of pride and showing a lot of great football. And if a few instances, or let's say a little bit more luck, they could have been sitting with 4 or even 6 points at this stage. So it's not all lost. And hopefully this is it's a quick education for the young team. And the side note is that, yes, Kessie got sent off and it's unfortunate, but in general, it feels like he is a slight problem right now. His head is not right. Could be that this whole saga involving his contract is affecting him, or I wouldn't want to speculate, but in any case, it feels like he's a little bit of a liability right now, and perhaps it's worth him sitting out for a little bit and letting Benasser and Tonali run the show.
Yeah, well, perhaps you won't miss him too much on Sunday then, because we've got our first Scudetto derby of the season as Milan go to Bergamo to face Atalanta.
Atalanta, of course, took this very strange Scudetto derby trophy last season, and we both resent Kenny for it.
Yeah. How are you feeling about your chances this time around?
Well, Atalanta are missing Gozens now that he got injured midweek. So it's interesting. They've had, like I said, a slow start in the league. And we will have Kessie on Sunday. He'll be suspended for a Champions League match, but not for that. But we do have injuries. We have Kjær coming back. We have, but now Florenzi needs surgery. Our injuries just keep piling up. So it's always hard to know.
Florenzi being out could be a blessing, but that's just me being a little bit
He has
naughty.
the ideas of a champion and the finishing skills of Borini. So it is very frustrating to watch. Yeah, it's hard to know. It really depends on the mentality after, you saw all the players just so shocked and hurt by the calls that happened and the, everything midweek. And so does Pioli get in their heads and get them to bounce back? Or do they, they give up and resign? And obviously Atalanta have done some serious damage to us in recent seasons. And so honestly, it's a difficult game for me to call.
Yeah. I think if Kenny were here, he might perhaps predict Milan. I mean, he was, I think he correctly called that Atalanta may well lose to Fiorentina. I know their form's picked up a little bit since then, obviously beating young boys of Bern in the Champions League. But what do you think, Buzz?
Young boys! I think, as Elaine said, it's always tough encounter, and Atalanta seem to have started to get their gears in motion. However, I'm fairly confident, again, as I've said in the past few weeks, because Milan are playing some great football, and even though the results haven't always come our way, particularly versus Juventus and also in the 2 Champions League games, there is a lot of depth, and I think ultimately, especially because Atalanta are also missing a few players, our superior depth of squad should just pip them. Having said that, a draw would also be fine because we're really on a great run so far.
Yeah, we're undefeated in the league, and this is only the 3rd time that we've gotten 16 points in our first 3 matches. Since the other times were 2003 and 4 and last season. So we are doing well in the league, but like I said, midweek it's hard to know with our young team how they bounce back from that.
Yeah. I think I'd kind of hope for a draw, both for just the competitiveness of the league and the kind of peace on this podcast. But I think Milan are going to take it. So let's see. Maybe I've cursed you guys. We should also, I guess, talk a little bit about the Nations League because the semi-finals coming up next week before we record. Italy versus Spain at the San Siro. Stadium's going to be at 50% capacity. No Zaniolo and no Moise Kean. Does it sound a bit bitter, Buzz, if I ask as an Englishman, does anyone really care about the Nations League?
First of all, it's funny you mentioned it today because apparently Italy beat England at cricket today as well, just to continue a summer.
Wait. An Italian team beat an English team.
Apparently.
It was not the English first team.
Okay. I don't know anything about cricket, but it's so on theme for this summer of domination, including the 100 meters and a few other things. But having said that, I think this it's one of those classic trophies that if you're in it, you're all in, and if you're not in it, you care less about it. It's been a good competition overall because it's allowed smaller nations to kind of play against teams in their own bracket. But of course, if Italy were to go on to win it, it would be a nice additional feather to their hat. And also the game against Spain is another chance to extend this unreal non-loss streak. So there's a lot of narrative there. And let's not forget that these 2 teams played each other in the Euro not so long ago. So I think Italy-Spain will always be a great fixture regardless of the setting. And the fact that it's a quote-unquote semi-final just adds a little bit of spice.
Yeah, I don't care about the Nations League at all. We do not need more competitions. But Spain-Italy is always a great matchup, and I would totally watch just for that.
Yeah, I'd take that point. I guess it's at least maybe got a slightly more edge than just a friendly. So just be interesting to see how these teams are shaping up, sort of a few months on from the Euros.
Just a quick note that Ciro Immobile limped off today on Thursday in the game against Lokomotiv, and he's a doubt for the weekend game, but also he'll be a doubt for the game against Spain. Given his recent form against Italy, maybe that's a blessing. I don't know. His recent form for Italy, sorry.
And now quickly a roundup of what's going on elsewhere. That game that we hypothesized about a couple of weeks ago, the Italy versus Argentina Continental Champions game, has been confirmed. As far as we know, it's not going to be played at the Diego Armando Maradona Stadium, but we think it should be.
Yes.
And speaking of the Diego Armando Maradona Stadium, there were 5 goals, 2 red cards, 13 yellow cards, including both managers, a disallowed goal, a half-hearted brawl in Napoli's loss against Spartak Moscow. First defeat of the season for Spalletti's men, and 19 minutes of added time. So there's just so much going on, even a game with all that. We don't have time to really talk about it.
A goal after 13 seconds, which is the quickest goal ever for an Italian team in the Europa League.
And on another quick point on Inter, we mocked Juventus for posting the all-time Serie A record losses a few weeks back, and Inter have broken that record, so well done to them.
245 million euros.
They saw Juventus and they're like, hold my beer.
I wonder how much of that was spent on rubbish marketing. Anyway, I digress. It's time for Good Week, Bad Week. And we've got definitely a few nominations for Bad Week. What about Good Week? Elaine, you want to make the case for Lazio?
Yeah, I don't usually make any cases for Lazio in the good way, but they did have a good week. They won the derby, obviously, and then they also won versus Lokomotiv today. I believe we were recording during that game. So yeah, good week for them.
Yeah, I think they're a clear front runner. Boaz, you wanted to make the case for Juve as well, but obviously given the big losses that we've just talked about, I mean, I know they weren't announced this week, but what was the Juventus case?
Off the field, it wasn't the best week, but on the field, they finally came back to winning ways. They beat Chelsea, who, as we mentioned, are the European champions. And they also got a result in the league, despite sweating it out a little bit. But I would probably say that on the balance of things, Lazio are better shout for this.
Yeah, let's give it to the Eagle, shall we? Good week for Lazio. And then on the other side, we've probably maybe got a few more nominations, but let's keep it brief. Obviously, Roma for losing the derby, potentially. Any other nominations? Bologna, Milan, Elaine, sorry.
Yeah, Bologna, they lost 4-2 to Empoli, and now there's talks of Mihailovic being sacked. They're not renewing the director Sabatini. They're not renewing his contract. So things are kind of falling apart there. So I'd give them a bad week for sure.
Yeah, I think we should give it to Bologna, especially given that the Englishman that scored for Roma. I think that makes more sense. So bad week for Bologna. Now Kenny's not here to do his upcoming fixtures section. We've already mentioned, obviously, Milan-Atalanta and the Torino derby is incoming. Fiorentina-Napoli is probably the other pick of the weekend, isn't it, Baz?
Yeah, that's going to be a real spectacular game, and also it's going to be a test of Napoli's resolve, particularly having lost this evening in Europe. Fiorentina are probably, Napoli did beat Juventus, so there is that to say, but Fiorentina are the next quote-unquote good team that Napoli will face, and I think Italiano's men will test Napoli in a way that they probably haven't been tested yet so far.
But do you think that Vincenzo Italiano and his bench will make fun of them, Napoli, the whole second half?
Yeah, this is a reference to the fact that Spalletti got his yellow card because apparently a player on the Spartak Moscow bench was having a laugh at his expense throughout the whole match. It's again, I say this almost every week, but Spalletti is a very strange person, and he did spend a lot of time in Russia, so maybe there's some background, and maybe he understands what this guy is saying to him. But it just seems like a really weird thing to get annoyed about. Like, who cares what some guy on the bench is saying?
Yeah, it's like when Conte was getting harassed by the Juve directors.
Yeah, but at least that had fireworks. This is Spalletti fighting against some unknown.
He didn't even know. It looked like he didn't even know who the coach was. There was that video circulating. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Baz, you've been keeping up with Italians elsewhere across Europe, so do you want to give us the keeping up with the Italian section?
So first of all, our regular stop in Turkey, where we have Stefano Kaka, who scored his first hat-trick for Istanbul Başakşehir against Kayruk Rizespor. As I said in the past, he's a really useful striker, and it's kind of sad not to see him in Serie A right now, but it's great to see him banging them in. And meanwhile, also, Mario Balotelli has scored his third goal in 3 games for the Montella-managed Adana Demirspor. Elsewhere, Adelaide Olympic Football Club qualified for the round of 16 of the FFA Cup, which I guess is the Australian FA Cup. But the pick of this game was Italian player Fausto Erba, who, it does look a little bit like a pub league. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but he kind of dances around the area for a while and then decides that he can't be bothered anymore and just dinks it over the keeper. You should check it out. There's a defender in there. Sorry again to all our Australian listeners, but there's a defender in there who's literally seems like he's had a few pints before the game. Like, he shouldn't be on a football pitch, let alone like in the FA Cup. Anyways, it was a superb goal. Just the setting is not really fitting of the goal.
Elsewhere, apologies to Tifosi Down Under.
Amongst others. Elsewhere, I mentioned him last week, but Italy under-19 striker Sharon Dorr, who plays for Sporting Lisbon, scored against Barcelona, the under-19 side, and as they won 4-0. I'm highlighting this to show that the Barcelona disaster extends to far beyond the first team, and that their once famed Messiah is not really producing the goods right now, but that's maybe from my Spanish language podcast, which I'm recording later. Elsewhere, Gigi Donnarumma had made his Champions League debut, age 22, and kept a clean sheet against Manchester City. He did spill a ball at some point in the game, but he also made some crucial saves. So good on Gigi. And also that's a few more millions in his bank account. Vincenzo Grifo of Freiburg scored in their 3-0 win against Augsburg. And in Austria, Kevin Yeboah, the Italy under-21 striker, scored an open goal for Sturm Graz against Rapid Vienna, and he's still the top goal scorer over there. And lastly, a big up to Stefano Cousin, who is just being announced as the manager of South Sudan. So that's quite a fascinating adventure for him.
Yeah, thanks for that, Baz. So let's just move swiftly into the honourables and dishonourables section. I'm going to start off with yet another dishonourable for, I guess it's not really a dishonourable for Inter, actually. It's a dishonourable for UEFA. We've given them a few as well. But for banning Inter's snake shirt under Article 8, which is the equipment regulation, which says that the patterns can be unlimited, but cannot contain images, illustrations, or other symbols. Seems a bit petty. None of us are big fans of Inter, but I think we all quite like that shirt. So, especially
given what a disaster some of their other shirts are, this one was particularly nice, and obviously UEFA had to spoil it.
It's perfect for them, but they also had to take off some of their advertising too, which was weird.
It's nice to see that UEFA are focusing on the big picture and the financial regularities, players being bought by just one club in one country that we won't mention, oil states, etc. But this shirt is the big deal.
It is. I mean, that they're tackling racism too, right?
Yeah, UEFA, obviously, their priorities are beyond question. So let's just move swiftly on from that. Buzz, you wanted to give an honourable to is this the same, Klaas-Jan Huntelaar?
Klaas-Jan Huntelaar, former AC Milan striker, just currently signed for 6th Division Dutch side HC03, which is kind of his local side. That they needed a few extra players, and so out of retirement comes this 38-year-old Bombe. You might remember that last season with Schalke in severe trouble, he also made like a transfer to them to try and save them. So he seems to be the kind of guy, he's a footballer who thinks he's a fireman or something.
And Elaine, if UEFA's probably got the most dishonourables ever, this man is probably a close second. What's Agnelli been up to this week?
So Juventus announced their €200 million losses, and instead of focusing on that, he talked about the Super League, and he said that they were focusing on strong commitments to solidarity and mutuality, which was ironic given that he stabbed his best friend in the back to do the Super League project. So I think that's a definite dishonorable.
Yeah, absolutely. Truly outstanding, but expected. But as we've got a much happier one next, scoring a goal with a water bottle in your hand.
I'm always happy to mention Mattia Desto, because at one point, many moons ago, he looked like he was going to be Italy's future superstar striker, and he seems like generally quite a nice guy. It didn't really work out for him at Milan, Roma, etc. But at Genoa, he's finding like the ideal environment, and he scored a wonder goal. But perhaps what was really special about this goal was that he did it all with a water bottle in his hand, because he stopped for a drink and obviously had to suddenly run into play. I'm not sure if that's legal or not to have like a foreign object in your hand while you're playing. But in any case, good on him. It was one for the ages.
He's teaching kids to stay hydrated. It was very important.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I'm not sure about the rule actually. If it interferes with play, I know it's supposed to be a drop ball.
He could accidentally hit someone in the face with it. I mean, you could spray someone water in their eyes and run off. You know, there's like.
It does get pretty chippy in the box, you know.
Could be crazy.
Water in your eyes is tough.
Yeah. I'm not decided fully on whether this is an honourable or a dishonourable, but it's for Zaniolo and his gesture, or dick grab, as we've been calling it, towards the Lazio fans at the end of the derby. I understand he'd has some history with Lazio fans aiming insults towards his mother and that sort of thing. But Elaine reliably informs me he was fined €10,000 for it. So for a €10,000 dick grab, I think that's probably got to be a dishonourable.
That's a very expensive gift wrap for sure.
Yeah.
Worth it, I'd say.
In Kenny's absence, do you want to give Pessina his honourable?
Yeah, Pessina was the first Italian to score for Atalanta in the Champions League ever, so good on him, and nice to see young talent coming through.
And Baz, you've got one for Tomori.
Yes, after a 2-year absence, Tomori was picked for the England squad again, and I think it's testament to how well he's been playing for Milan and how much he's grown in the last almost season since he arrived in Italy. It's testament to Southgate that he's willing to look outside of the Premier League, particularly as maybe England aren't so stacked at centre-back despite having so many right-backs.
Yeah, I mean, he's happy to look outside now that we're beaten by them. But anyway, I'm not sure why this is me, given the two Milan fans on the podcast, but I wanted to give one to that. It was just because I'm the main fan of Ante Rebic on this podcast. And I just wanted to give him an honourable for the lineup video that was tweeted out by the Milan account. Everybody just giving fairly kind of standard waves to the camera, maybe. Rebic gives the kind of come hither gesture. Just very funny. So honourable to him. He is the best. And then this one I'm going to give, but it's actually Kenny's nomination of Bernardeschi for the Morata Challenge. We've had a look at it and we don't think it's a front runner, but thought it was worth a mention.
It's a glorious miss, but it's on the scale of Jack Bonaventura to Morata, it's not there yet.
And Boaz, you've got a double honourable to finish us off.
The first one is unfortunately dishonourable for a manager in the Prima Categoria, which is one of the lower leagues in Italy. But this guy called Giovanni Allosi, he got sent off, loses his mind, and goes and gives a complete sucker punch to the referee. I mean, obviously in this day and age, it's all over the social media. In his credit, he immediately resigned and said that because their club is known for bringing through youth talent, he's no example, and that the club doesn't deserve to have a manager like him. Having said that, maybe he should have thought about that before he punched a young referee in the face.
But he could be the future Gattuso. Remember, Gattuso slapped somebody in the face and then resigned, and then look at him now.
Isn't he unemployed still?
Something that to keep this slightly more serious, something that has to be said is that at least in the lower leagues, the disciplinary committee is very harsh, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had a multi-year ban for this. But in any case, the club have come out against it. He has resigned and also said that he doesn't see himself in these images and that he blacked out. But not the best scenes, and hopefully we won't see much more of that. But to bring it straight to a slightly happier matter, I want to give a honourable/dishonourable mention to Patrice Evra, who is running the commentary for Amazon for the Champions League in Italy. And clearly he's not quite sure about his new role. And first of all, as soon as he heard the Juventus anthem playing before the game, he tried to run onto the field while the players were warming up. So that was one video that's doing the rounds, and it's quite funny. But then after the game, he kind of invades into Allegri's post-match interview and starts bantering with him and giving him all "you played great, man, you did so well." And honestly, a certain degree of professionalism would be needed in this situation.
That's very good.
I'll give you guys the choice of whether that's an honourable or dishonourable. But Patrice Evra is a lot of fun, but maybe not the best commentator.
I'm against professionalism in most of its forms, so I think it's an honourable. Right, I think that's all we've got time for. First of all, just Elaine, thanks again for joining the podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you on, and hopefully you're still sober and somewhat interested in listening to our podcast in the future.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a blast.
And as I said, you can find Elaine at Milan Obsession on Twitter, milanobsession.com. Just search Milan Obsession on any podcast platform and you'll be able to find it. So yeah, we will be back with Kenny next week. if you don't already, please do subscribe to our podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your audio. We'll speak to you then. Until then, enjoy the football.
Che sta decretando lo scudetto del Milan in questo preciso istante. Finita! La Juventus è campione d'Italia. Questa data, il 6 maggio.
La Roma è campione d'Italia per la stagione 2000-2001.